Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for August 3rd, 2017. This is Peter Sciretta, and on today's show, Ben Pearson is going to join us for the water cooler to talk about him editing his travelogue from New Zealand. I'm going to be talking about building a podcast studio. In the mailbag, we're going to be talking about the best or favorite foreign films of all time. And in the news, we'll be talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi, Star Wars Episode 9, Stranger Things, Captain Marvel, and Transformers. Right now, I have with me Ben Pearson. How's it going, Ben?
Hey, Peter. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm in my new podcast studio that I built inside my closet. I wrote about this in the water cooler on slashfilm.com. Basically, when I started this podcast, I didn't know anything about audio. And in the last month, it has, been an education, to say the least. I had this Blue Yeti microphone, same one you have, and embarrassingly, I've been using it wrong for the last 8 years. I've been talking into the end of it like you would a normal mic, but this mic you talk into the side of it. So that is something I learned very early on with the complaints of echoey sounds. And speaking of echoey sounds, my place is a loft, so it's filled with echoes, and you can hear, my dog drinking from 2 rooms over. So I took a closet and I put some acoustic foam on the walls. I got a boom arm. I got, all in all, I got a desk. I think I spent like $200 to $300. Not that much. Got some good headphones. And hopefully right now what you're hearing is the fruit of this labor. It is a better sounding podcast. And,
so tell me about the acoustic foam. Where did you get that, and what is it?
Yeah, you can get it. You can get it at Home Depot. You can get it on Amazon. Amazon, it's like I think $15 for like 12 tiles, and I think I got 2 orders of those. And you basically put them on the walls, and it's basically kind of like these rigid foam that kind of prevents echoing. It also absorbs sound. I also have these things called bass traps that you got to put in like the corners of the walls, so it absorbs more of that bass.
Wow.
There's a lot to this. I've done a lot of reading online. I know what a difference between a pop filter and a microphone cover is, and
all right.
And I have a pop filter because I've been told that's better. So hopefully I'm not popping in your ears. But also, I think it's good to just have a dedicated place of work. So you come here and I feel like I'm doing this.
You're doing what you're supposed to be doing in that space.
Yes. Yeah. And this week you've been doing something similar, but on the video side. You went on a trip and you've been editing it.
Yes. Yeah. So in November of 2016, last November, my wife and I went to New Zealand for 2 weeks, and it was an incredible vacation, like the most epic trip I could have possibly imagined. We flew into Auckland and then drove down to the southern tip of the North Island and flew to the South Island and road trips all around.
Hold on a second. What made you decide New Zealand?
So we are both big Lord of the Rings fans, and obviously Hobbiton is like a huge draw there. It's become like a major tourist attraction, the actual place where they filmed the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. So that was part of it. And then we'd also we like, hiking and doing a lot of outdoor stuff. And New Zealand is maybe notorious is the wrong word, but it has like mountains and rainforests and beaches and glaciers and like all of these incredibly disparate environments all in one country. And it's a relatively small country too. I want to say that there's only like 13 million people that live there. I might be wrong about that, but in any case, it's a very small country, and there's I know for a fact that there are way more sheep than people in New Zealand. So that was a fact that we learned on the trip. But yeah, I got a GoPro Karma drone right before the trip, and we have like a Canon 6D, and we upgraded our iPhones and stuff to like 4K capable iPhone 7 Pluses just to like have all this equipment, and we went out and just experienced this incredible trip and shot as much video as we could on it. My wife had over 1,000 videos on her phone alone, so there was a ton of footage for us to sift through. And then ever since we got back, actually I think we waited about a month or two to really like dive into the footage and start categorizing it and everything. But ever since we got back, we've just been going through everything and organizing it and cutting it with Final Cut Pro into an 11.5 minute montage video that showcases all of the different places that we went and all the different environments that we were in. It was a super fun trip, and I think anybody who watches the video will probably be like, wow, I really want to go there. So that's it really serves as like the whole purpose of it is like, instead of a scrapbook or something like that, we can just, if we ever want to remember this trip, we can just, go and play this video. And it's a lot more, it really takes you back there, like as opposed to seeing a photo, like a still image, like actually seeing a few seconds of video really, makes a huge difference when you're like remembering the tactile feeling of being in a place.
Oh, for sure. And this video looks like it could have been paid for by the, Travel Commission of New Zealand. It is beautiful. And the way you film it, you have like these contraptions where you put the GoPro on the end of like these strings and swing it around you on top of a mountain. It's like amazing. I don't know. I feel like if I was on vacation, I would forget to get these shots. Like you're getting these amazing shots of things, but it's beautiful. You can, I believe that's embedded on the water cooler on /film.com. Yes. Yep. And okay, let's move on to the mailbag. Nicholas E. from Chicago Heights, Illinois asks, what's your favorite foreign film and why? Now, I know when I presented this question to you before we went on the air, you were a little
I was freaked out, Peter.
Yeah.
I was completely spooked by this question because I did not see it coming. And this is like a big question, like your favorite foreign film. That's like a huge deal. So I was not mentally prepared to answer this. But after thinking about it for a few minutes, I think you and I both came up with some that we really love. So I don't know if we really need to like get into the why as much, but at least we can list out a few for people to seek out if they haven't yet.
It's weird though, because I think as film geeks, we're so used to being like, what's your favorite film? And, having a list off the top of your head. But once you say foreign film, you're like, I don't know. I love so many foreign films, but wait, I gotta like do a mental inventory and like ranking of all of them. Yeah. The one that for me is probably my favorite, and it's in my top 10 movies of all time, is a film called Cinema Paradiso. And it's an Italian film. It was released by Miramax in the 1980s. And it's about a famous film director who, as a kid, worked inside a projection booth in the small village in the small town in Italy. And it cuts between him as an adult, as a famous film director, going back home, and him as a kid having his first love. It's coming of age, which I just love. And it's a movie about the love of not just movies, but cinema. Do you know what I mean? The movie going experience. And if you have not seen it, I would highly recommend it to you. I know there's two different cuts because, Harvey Scissorhands got involved, and there's one that's much longer and there's one much shorter. I don't remember which one I prefer, but that is my favorite foreign film of all time. What are some of the films on your list, Ben?
So the ones that sort of came to mind after my initial panic were Holy Motors, which is Leos Carax's 2012 film. It's basically it really defies expectation and explanation, but it is like a bizarre fantasy drama that's about acting in a weird way. So that one also has a bit of a Hollywood connection in that sort of thematic sense. Let the Right One In, the original vampire film from Sweden, is fantastic. Oldboy, obviously a stone cold classic at this point. And then two action movie classics that I really, really love are John Woo's Hard Boiled and The Killer. There are a ton of... Go ahead.
I was going to say there's so many... If you added action to this list, I mean, The Raid is one of the newer ones, but the John Woo's early work, that shot in... I believe it was the killer, the hospital scene shot.
Hard boiled.
That's hard boiled.
Yeah, it's hard boiled. Yeah, with the elevator and stuff, the shootout, the long continuous shot.
Oh my God. I feel like we're spoiled today with these long continuous shots with digital filmmaking.
Yeah.
You go back and watch that. That's on film. You know, if you're spending money, and if you mess up, you know, there's explosions, squid shots. You know, it is much more elaborate than what you can do today.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah. And like, I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, there are so many. We could get into like the movies of Tony Jaa and like all sorts of, hardcore, Donnie Yen and all these amazing action stars. But I'm keeping it relatively small scale here. Just a couple more I wanted to mention are Run, Lola Run, which I saw for the first time in college and really fell in love with that film. And then one that I just saw right around the time that La La Land came out was The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which is a French film that is entirely sung. Like every line of dialogue in the movie is sung, and it is just I think it's like from the 60s, and it was a big influence on Damien Chazelle for La La Land, and it is one of the most purely gorgeous looking movies that I've ever seen. The colors in that film, the actors, just the framing and the costumes and the makeup and everything, it's a stunning movie. So those are the ones that sort of came to me after my my sheer panic at posing this question.
Run, Lola Run was one of the first films I saw in an independent theater, and I traveled to Boston, which was my local city, and just seeing a film like that was just so different than what I was used to seeing at the multiplex.
There's so much energy in that movie. It's crazy.
And I'm actually kind of disappointed in that filmmaker because I feel like, he did some good stuff like Perfume, Story of Murder, but I feel like he hasn't quite lived up to the potential that was seen in that movie. Another film I have to mention for favorite foreign films is Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth, which you said when we were talking before the podcast that you don't even consider it a foreign film. And, it does have subtitles. It is a foreign film, but it is so maybe magical, and even though it's dark and definitely foreign, it is. I think it does have an American appeal to it.
It's like what you were talking about before, where it's like moviegoers always have their list of favorite movies at the ready, and I categorize that movie as like, oh yeah, that's a Guillermo del Toro movie. I don't necessarily categorize it, primarily in my head as a foreign film, but it is, and it's an amazing one.
Okay, let's move on. Now, don't panic. Star Wars Episode 9 is getting a new writer. The film isn't expected to start shooting until January. Colin Trevorrow wrote the script with his writing partner, Derek Connolly, but they are now bringing in a writer to help polish that script, and that is Jack Thorne, who wrote Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and he also... he's been a mainstay of UK, television series and miniseries, working on Skins, Cast Off, The Fades, This Is England. He has an upcoming small screen adaptation of Electric Dreams, the Philip K. Dick story. And he just wrote the Jacob Tremblay movie Wonder. He's a hot screenwriter at the moment. I think he was actually attached to Neil Gaiman's The Sandman for David S. Goyer. I'm not sure if that's still happening, but he's coming in. I don't want to say last minute because he has 6 months before shooting starts, and it's probably not to do a total overhaul. Not that we know. I'm speculating. It's probably not to do a total overhaul of the story. It's probably to more polish up character moments and dialogue. I think they're probably deep into the set designing and building phase at this point, so I don't think it's to completely overhaul the script. Does this give us any need to worry about this movie, Ben?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look at with Rogue One, in particular, Gary Whitta was on that film to start, and then I think he either left the project or someone else came on to do a rewrite at maybe a similar time in the production timeline as what's going on here. And that movie had maybe some trouble in the post-production side of things, but I don't think there was that many, that many script troubles with it. So as long as
Yeah, I think Chris Weitz came in like 8 or 9 months before. Yeah.
That's right. So I think, especially with it seems to me like Kathleen Kennedy and the people at Lucasfilm are taking care of their family jewels a little bit more with the saga films than they are on the spinoffs. There have not been nearly as many issues with those as there have been with the spin-off films so far. So I would like to think that that they are really nailing that down and trying to avoid any of the problems that have arisen on the spin-off films. So I don't think there's going to be much reason for us to worry about this at this stage.
It's much smarter to spend your production money in the pre-production phase than it is in the post-production phase. It's a lot cheaper to hire a screenwriter for a couple $100,000 than it is to do millions and millions of dollars of reshoots. So I think it's smart. Also in the news, Star Wars: The Last Jedi. John Boyega has done an interview and he mentioned that the movie is going to be a amazing send-off to Carrie Fisher. What do we know about this, Ben?
Yeah, so Boyega was talking with ABC News, I think probably to promote his new movie Detroit, which is Catherine Bigelow's film, which is coming out this weekend. And he said this movie, talking about Episode 9 or The Last Jedi, he said this movie, it sends her off in an amazing, amazing way. And she is still kept alive in this franchise. That's the beauty of it. She lives forever in a sense. So this sounds like a Heath Ledger and the Joker type of situation where they do not kill the character on screen. Also comes to mind Paul Walker in Fast and Furious, where like the character still lives on in this universe, and could potentially even have impact on future stories just from off screen, basically. And of course
she could be heading up the new Galactic Senate or something.
Yeah, exactly.
We just hear of her moves.
Right.
Yeah.
And those moves could impact our, primary protagonist characters in a major way moving forward. And I think the initial plan was to have Colin Trevorrow's movie deal more with Princess Leia as like a major character. And unfortunately, that's not going to be able to happen. I think the movie had to get reworked a little bit in the wake of Carrie Fisher's death. But yeah, hopefully what we're talking about will come to pass there, where General Leia now will have some actual impact on the story as it continues. And then also some other Star Wars thing that I thought maybe was worth bringing up was recently Screen Rant pointed to a Directors Guild of America rule that might explain why Lord and Miller were fired from the Han Solo movie at the time that they were.
Yeah, because everybody was like, why, if they've completed, 80% of the film, why would they fire directors at that point?
Right. So basically it boils down to there is a rule in the DGA Creative Handbook that says that a director who has been replaced after directing 90% of the movie has post-production creative rights. So this is something that the Guild put in place to protect the directors that are members, so they can't just be replaced at the last minute and by producers who maybe are not happy with the work that they've done or whatever. So it's all about a percentage of how much work they completed at that point. So
what does that mean? That means that they get to be in the editing room?
Yeah, that means that they get creative control over the edit. I believe that on the most technical level, it means that they have a few weeks to produce a director's cut completely unmolested, unmessed with by the producers. Like they cannot, change any sort of editorial decision. I believe the directors have the right at that point to sit in the room with the editor and come up with an entire full cut of the movie that then I think the producers can sort of go back and forth with. But at this stage, Lord and Miller had directed almost 85% of the movie. So if they had gone just another week further, they might have passed that 90% threshold. So that it makes the firing at that specific time seem like a more strategic play on Lucasfilm's part to make sure that they wouldn't have any say over what went on in the post-production segment than what we all thought before, which was like, this is sort of a blindsiding thing. Like, what are they doing here? What's going on? So it seems now that we sort of understand a little bit more of the ins and outs of the DGA rulings, it seems like maybe a little bit more of a shrewd move by Kathleen Kennedy and the Lucasfilm team, who just don't have the time. If they're keeping the same release date, they don't have time to go through this extra step of giving Lord and Miller the time to, produce their own cut.
Oh, for sure. And let's not pretend, there's no way Lord and Miller had a director's cut in their contract for a Star Wars film, but it would just delay things quite a bit for a film that, needs, visual effects and whatnot. You need to get that done ASAP. Also in the news, we've suspected this for some time, but the Duffer Brothers, the creators of Stranger Things, have now confirmed that Stranger Things was actually pitched as an anthology series. Speaking to Screen Rant, they say there is some truth to that. This was, when we were originally pitching it, that was true, because we looked at Stephen King's It, and we liked that the time jump that they made. So we kind of pitched that. Then Netflix was really interested in it as a series, because rightfully so. They were like, I think people will want to continue on this journey with them. And they were right. Once we started building the writer's room and working on the show, we started to develop it and plan it as a multi-season arc. So even though it was pitched as a anthology series, which means, like Fargo or American Horror Story or any of those shows where each season is a different story with different characters for the most part. When they went to actually write the episodes, it was envisioned as a multi-season arc. So it's not like that was supposed to be the ending of Stranger Things. I know a lot of people, when they first saw the first season, were kind of like, oh, I like that as an ending. That, like, you kind of have that jump scare moment at the end, and you don't, it's kind of ambiguous of like where things are. And that could have easily been the ending, especially if it hadn't been popular and Netflix didn't order another season. Would you have preferred an anthology series?
That's hard to say, because I haven't seen the second season yet. I love those characters so much, and I am a little worried about Stranger Things season 2. I'm a generally optimistic person as it stands when I approach a piece of content, of entertainment like this, and I'm really hoping that it's good. But I love the first season so much that it's going to be hard to leap that bar. So I think they could have sideswiped that potential problem by introducing a whole new, cast and a whole new angle on the story in an anthology format. But I think ultimately, even if the second season isn't as great, I'm glad that we'll have the time to spend with these characters again in a continuous sort of multi-season format like that.
It's funny that he mentions it, because that obviously has them as kids and them as adults, and it would have been kind of interesting to jump, to the 90s or the 2000s and follow these characters. I know that's not the definition of anthology, but them having it be a sequel but with totally different actors, that could be interesting, and that obviously could be something that they do if America isn't too in love with Millie Bobby Brown. So, yeah. So anyways, moving on. Also in the news, there's new rumors surrounding Marvel's Captain Marvel. I don't know much about Captain Marvel, but apparently this might involve the original Captain Marvel.
Yeah, so MCU Exchange, who predicted or broke the story about Thanos' children being the Black Order a few weeks before that story officially was confirmed at Comic-Con, say that Marvel is going to show up in the Captain Marvel movie. And this is the first original Captain Marvel. I also am not super familiar with those comics, but diving into Marvel's super extensive Wikipedia page and with some help from our own Jacob Hall, who is a big expert on all things Marvel, I was able to write up this article that sort of gives a brief history of who Marvel is in very, very short terms. He is a Kree warrior who in the comics basically becomes a superhero who is like entangled in this web of this plot to destroy the Earth, and his DNA gets fused with Carol Danvers in an accident. And that is what gives her superpowers. And eventually she, at first, I believe she fights under the name Miss Marvel. And then after Marvel dies, she takes on the Captain Marvel moniker and gets her new costume that everybody is familiar with from the modern interpretation of that character. So this basically confirms to me, as long as this rumor proves to be true, this confirms that that we're going to see that same origin story in this movie, or at least a flashback of it. I don't know. I think I heard years ago Kevin Feige say that Captain Marvel is not going to be an origin story, but then since then there's been a little bit of back and forth about what form that script is actually going to take, and I haven't heard any inside source, any rumors or anything about what that script looks like at this moment. But I imagine
now that it's a prequel set in the 90s,
right?
With Nick Fury, and it sounds like the Skrulls are going to be involved, which are the enemies of the Kree, and obviously the Kree are how Captain Marvel gets her powers. This all lines up, I think.
And the that same outlet also speculates that the reason that Carol Danvers won't be in Avengers Infinity War is because maybe she is trapped in the quantum realm, which is where Janet Van Dyne is presumably trapped in the Ant-Man side of the MCU. So that could explain why we haven't seen Carol Danvers and Captain Marvel in any of the other Marvel Cinematic Universe movies leading up to this.
That would be interesting, and that would also explain why Brie Larson looks like Brie Larson in the 1990s as well as the 2017s.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Also in the news, Fred Topel is our correspondent at the Television Critics Association event, and he was able to get an exclusive that we ran on /film.com that Akiva's Goldsman, who is a producer and writer of a lot of different films, ranging from I Am Legend, A Beautiful Mind, Batman and Robin, I, Robot. He's had a very mixed bag, including the upcoming Dark Tower, which we are both seeing tonight, and I am afraid of. He was brought into the Transformers writer's room where they invented 15 to 20 upcoming Transformers sequels, spin-offs, reboots, who knows what. And apparently he is no longer involved in the Transformers series. Fred asked Akiva at the TCAs if he was involved with Transformers, and Goldsman simply said no. So what that means, I don't know. Was he just involved in that early days of the spitballing of all these upcoming ideas? Are they still planning on doing these 15 different Transformers ideas that we've heard about? We don't know. It's all speculation at this point, but I think we can both agree that not having Akiva Goldsman involved in Transformers is a good thing.
Yes.
He's generally involved with some pretty bad products. He's like the Avi Arad. What Avi Arad is to SpiderMan in the Spider-Verse, he is to, a multitude of different franchise movies, because he's
and the thing is, I feel like he's maybe a much better producer than he is a writer. Like I don't think the guy is completely untalented. He obviously has the ability to get things done and get movies made. I just wish that he wasn't as involved in the writing side of the creative spark of these Hollywood films as he seems to be. He loves to just sort of like sneak his way into having a screenwriting credit on something. And odds are, looking at his previous work, whatever he does that with is just not going to be as good as it could have been otherwise.
He must be one of those guys that's really good in the room, because, it's, you look at the credits and you're like, how is this guy keep on getting hired for these, franchise films that are not critically praised, not loved by fans, and aren't, the biggest blockbusters of all time. See The Dark Tower, which we're seeing tonight. That does it for the news. Ben, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
You can find me writing every day at /film.com. You can find me on Twitter at Ben Pears.
And you can find me on Twitter at /film. This has been Slash Film Daily for August 3rd, 2017. If you have questions for the mailbag, please send them to peter@slashfilm.com. Please go to iTunes, give us a review, give us a rating, because that helps us tremendously. And thank you for listening.